On this episode of Lights, Camera, Action, we will hear the story behind Rick Revel's latest music video Johnny Reb.
Got something exciting to tell you about. I'm on my way to Parker's Crossroads, Tennessee. I'm going to be filming a music video. The song's called Johnny Reb. First time I ever heard the song, believe it or not, came past the lips of my dad. We were riding horses one day, and I was very small. I started riding horses, believe it or not, around age 3. So by age 5 and 6, I was a seasoned rider by then, and Dad always wanted a riding buddy. We'd go out riding horses, and he would sing this song. It was very popular during that time, called Johnny Reb. And he would sing that song, and believe it or not, my uncle would also sing that song when he and I would go riding on separate occasions. So I was familiar with the song. Then later on, I heard it over the radio when Johnny Horton would sing it. And the song's, you fought all the way, Johnny Reb, Johnny Reb. You fought all the way, Johnny Reb. That's what my dad would always sing. Never heard all the verses, but he would sing the chorus. And I don't know, when I started playing music and playing on stage, I never did learn the song. It was kind of unusual. As much as I heard my uncle and my dad sing the song and familiar with Johnny Horton singing it, I didn't sing the song. And it wasn't until years later that I met the man who wrote the song. The gentleman's name is Merle Kilgore, and Merle became a neighbor of mine. Next door neighbor. Lived a few houses down from me, same neck of the woods. He was the manager of Hank Williams Jr. at the time. We became friends. He became my mentor. I would go over to his office at Hank Jr.'s Enterprise there, Hank Williams Jr. Enterprise in Paris, Tennessee, and we would visit on occasion. And it was during a time that he was trying to encourage Hank to record the song Johnny Reb. And the record label that Hank was on at the time was saying, no, we will not put the song out, that it's politically incorrect. And this was back late 90s, early 2000s, and they were even then saying it was politically incorrect. So Merle was a little ticked off that, the song's not going to be recorded, and he liked the version that Hank Jr. was going to put out. But record label was giving us some lip about it, so he asked me, would you record the song? And I was very honored that he asked me to do it, because at that time, as a mentor, he was trying to encourage me to pick up the mantle and pick up the baton and be another Johnny Horton. He thought that I had that ability, and I appreciated him thinking that. Now, of course, I don't think of myself that way, but that's the way he saw me, as possibly being the next Johnny Horton. So he encouraged me to record the song. Me and Tom Miller, a friend of mine, Tom lived in Franklin, Kentucky at the time. He plays several instruments, I play several instruments. So we went to the studio in Franklin, Kentucky and recorded the song. Came back, and at this time, Merle was already suffering from cancer. So he was homebound, and I went to his house to see him, and I played him a version of the song, one of the mixes of the song, and he said he loved it. He said, oh, I love it. He said, that's one of my favorite versions of it. Only one that's any better is when I sing it. Because he put it on an album himself, and did a great job on it. He liked my version, encouraged me, wanted to do something with the song, and within a year, I lost my friend to cancer. And once Merle died, the whole project kind of simmered and got put on a shelf, and nothing happened with the song. So recently, all these years later, I was listening to the song and I thought, I've got to do something with it. So today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to bring out and dust off the old Johnny Reb song, and before long, you're going to see the music video.
the way, Johnny Reb, Johnny Reb. You fought all the way, Johnny Reb. I saw you a marching with a Robert E. Lee. You held your head up high trying to win the victory. You fought for your folks, but you didn't die in vain. Even though you lost to speak highly of your name. You fought all the way, Johnny Reb, Johnny Reb. You fought all the way, Johnny Reb. I heard your teeth chatter from the cold outside. Saw the bullets open up the wounds in your side. I saw the young boys as they began to fall, with tears in your eyes, cause you couldn't help them all. You fought all the way, Johnny Reb, Johnny Reb. You fought all the way, Johnny Reb. I saw General Lee raise a saber in his hand. Heard the cannons roar as you made your last stand. You marched in the battle with the gray and the red. The cannon smoke littered today's account the dead. You fought all the way, Johnny Reb, Johnny Reb. You fought all the way, Johnny Reb. When Honest Dave heard the news about your fall, folks thought he'd call for a great victory ball. But he asked the band to play the song Dixie. Well, you Johnny Reb and all that you believe. You fought all the way, Johnny Reb, Johnny Reb. You fought all the way, Johnny Reb. Yeah, you fought all the way, Johnny Reb, Johnny Reb. Fought all the way, Johnny Reb. Yeah, you fought all the way, Johnny Reb, Johnny Reb. 'Cause you fought all the way, Johnny Reb.
Doubt there's going to be somebody that watches this video. They're going to think it's possibly inappropriate that we're even talking about Confederates because of the world we live in today. It seems to be getting to be a harder situation. One of those situations where people think it's improper. They think that we shouldn't be talking about that portion of our history. But I'm here to tell you, that portion of our history is just as important as any other. Now let me explain my reasoning on that. As I look back at my family tree, I found that some of the original Revels that came here, which would be on my dad's side of the family, I found that they came through Jamestown. I find that there were John and Mary Revel. They were indentured servants. Indentured servanthood usually lasts 7 years. They were up for 12 years, so apparently it took them longer to work off their debt. In other words, they owed the company that sponsored them to make the trip to America. Usually, if you did not have the money, you had to find somebody that would sponsor you, would pay for the trip. So they had to serve those individuals or that company for 7 to 12 years, and it took John and Mary apparently 12 years. Now from that, I found several members of our family, various sides of the family, that were part of the Revolutionary War. I find that some were in the War of 1812. I find that I did have some in the Civil War, or what we call the War between the States. Find that my granddad, World War I, with his two brothers, Fred and Charlie, they were in France, fought in the trenches in France during World War I. I had ancestors in World War II. My dad was in Korea. So somewhere along the way, I've had somebody in my family tree involved in American history and struggles and skirmishes and battles. So if I'm going to honor my father, Joe Revel, my granddad, Hughley Revel, for their service to the country, service to something they believed in, a cause, why shouldn't I do that with my Confederate ancestor? So I do that. Now some would raise the question and the issue of slavery, and I'd like to address that real briefly here. According to the 1860 census, the United States Census, we found in that census that less than 10% of the southern population owned slaves. Now we do find also in other studies, I found one individual that was writing a book, and he said it was at least 21%. Oddly enough, that 21%, if I was generous enough to add 4 more percent to that and round it off at 25%, that leaves you with an interesting question. What did the other 75% fight for if they didn't own slaves? So that's where you open up the question of what did they fight for? Most felt that they were fighting for protecting their homes, protecting their families. And that's exactly how most felt, not all. But we'll go to one step further, talking about the slavery issue, which that will come up. Somebody else will bring it up, so I might as well address it. Leaders for the northern side, there was a Colonel Fielding Hurst that fought for the Union. He owned slaves, took them into battle with it. And believe it or not, Ulysses S. Grant, before he came to Tennessee to be the general of the United States Army, he left a plantation home, left his wife there, and they had slaves. And he was the foreman of the farm, which means that he was over those slaves, 35 to be exact. When his wife came to see him at Vicksburg, she brings 3 of those with her to Vicksburg, which poses an interesting question. If the Union was fighting to free the slaves, why did Grant, his wife especially, have them in her possession? And as the story goes, did not till it was like 1865 after the Emancipation Proclamation before they freed those slaves. So study of history, that's something you must do before you pass judgment on somebody that's honoring their Confederate ancestor. And as far as I know, nobody in the Revel family owned slaves, as far as I can tell. Don't find that in any of the family records. So what did they fight for? Like most of the Southerners, to protect their homes, their families, and they felt they were being invaded. Their state of Tennessee was being invaded. So that's why they joined. So if you would like to enjoy this video for the pure fact that we're honoring veterans that fought, regardless of what side they fought on, I'm with you on that. Because I have family that fought on both sides. So take time not only to honor those that wore the stars and stripes, but for those that wore the stars and bars, they need to be remembered also. So when you hear the song Johnny Reb, just know that that's who I'm trying to honor, is those that gave their all for a cause they believed in. I hope you enjoy the video.